with Pivotal's Martin Lippert to talk about an exciting new Eclipse project, Project Flux, or as some people would know it, Flight. Mm-hmm. Martin, can you explain a little bit more about the Eclipse Flux project to people?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. The Project Flux is a new project at Eclipse that we just started a few weeks ago. And Flux is about moving towards the cloud-based era of developer tooling, basically. And the Project Flux tries to kind of solve two different problems, or tries to find a way to solve different problems in these kind of cloud-based developer tooling. First of all, it follows the idea that future developer tooling will be in some way be based on the cloud or running in the browser instead of the classical desktop IDE that we have at the moment. But we don't really know yet how this cloud-based developer tooling will look like. There are certain ideas about implementing exactly the same IDE that's running on the desktop at the moment, just running the same stuff in the browser window, but I don't think that's the right way. So Flux is trying to find out a way, how could this cloud-based developer tooling look like, and how could that be implemented? That's one part. And the second part is that if you take a look at the first approaches towards cloud-based developer tooling today, you typically see that people are building something inside the cloud, that's running inside the cloud, you can access it with the browser, and that's it, right? Yeah. You have to jump over the wall into this cloud-based world, and then you are kind of caught in this world, right? You have to check out your stuff in the cloud, and your sources, and your files, and whatever you have, that's all running inside the cloud, and you have to leave everything behind that's on your local machine. And that's, yeah, it's kind of it's a completely separate world. Right? It's cloud-based developer tooling, that's a separate world, and desktop IDE is a separate world, and people are. Or it's quite difficult for people to jump over this wall because it's this kind of either-or decision that you have to make. Yeah. And jumping over this wall, that's a big step because you have to leave behind everything that's running on your local machine, all your command line tools, or your existing desktop IDE features and things like that. So this step is quite huge, and as long as maybe the cloud-based developer tooling doesn't provide you with the same kind of feature set, that's really a huge step for you to go, and people think, no, I will continue using my desktop IDE because it's and I can use my command line tools, and I have everything on my machine, right? All the files on my machine, and I can do whatever I want with them.
It's just an easier life, I guess.
Yeah, and it's kind of an easier life. And Flux is trying to build a bridge between those two worlds so that we can, as tool makers, which I am, that we can move towards cloud-based development tooling in a very smooth and slow way, so that people, they do not have to jump over the wall, they don't have to do this kind of either-or decisions. They can start using cloud-based development tooling at the same time while they are continuing to use their desktop IDE. And they can start to adopt this cloud-based development tool more and more over time. But they can at the same time still use the existing stuff, and maybe they wake up one day and think, oh, wow, I haven't used my desktop IDE for all week now, so looks like the cloud-based tooling is quite feature-rich now. But you do not have to leave everything behind. Like you can choose every day, every minute where to go, and that's what we are trying to solve with Project Flux. And I can talk a little bit about more the technical details of that as well. But that's I think the basic idea. First, how should this developer tooling look like, and how should that be built? And second, how can we bridge the desktop IDE and the cloud-based developer tooling so that there's a very, very smooth migration path between these two worlds, so that you do not have to jump over this wall.
I guess that's kind of, that's also originally your project was called Project Flux, but there was a name change, which kind of makes sense.
When we started Project Flux, we called it internally Flight. That was our first name chosen, and right before we made this public and proposed the project to Eclipse, there was the other project from Twitter coming out. It's also called Flight, and we said, oh yeah, maybe it's not a good idea to have both projects called
Yeah,
Flight.
probably don't want to annoy Twitter too much.
Yeah, not annoy Twitter too much, but also not confusing people, right?
Yeah.
Because if you say, oh yeah, I'm working on Project Flight, you mean the Twitter project or the other one? So it could be a lot of confusion coming up, and say, no, that doesn't make sense to confuse people. So let's choose different name, and therefore it's now called Flux. And I totally love the new name. It's awesome.
It's a good name. It's memorable.
Yeah. And of course, I always remember these flux capacitor thing from Back to the Future movie. But that's
Really cool.
yeah.
So kind of going back to what you were saying before, obviously there is this cognitive dissonance in between how people are developing kind of, you've either got the desktop or you've got to jump between the cloud. Why don't you think anyone's come up with a solution before? Do you think it's just that the technology is kind of so new, or people are just kind of stuck in a rut?
I'm not sure. I think many of the elements that you have in your existing desktop IDE, they are the usual elements, and you're very used to them, right? You have the navigator, you open files, you have different tabs where you open files, you can edit your stuff, and the things that I saw in the browser, they're really trying to rebuild exactly this, and to me it feels kind of a little bit strange to have, you have your browser window open and you have your browser tabs, different browser pages, and inside one of those tabs you have another panel of tabs where you switch between your files of your IDE. That feels like it's not really adopting the idea of web applications or how web applications should be built. And interestingly, the Orion project at Eclipse, they are trying to build this kind of cloud-based IDE as well. They are trying to move away from this desktop IDE paradigm of UI design, and trying to adopt more the webby way of doing things. But even in that project, some of these elements are coming back, right? And people say, no, we want a menu where you can drop down menu, and you would like to have this kind of navigator on the left side where they can see with the files I have, and click on them, and then they open on the right side. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because people are used to it, or maybe it's the natural way of doing things, and it doesn't mean maybe it's because the web applications are doing things differently. Maybe it doesn't mean they're doing it better. Maybe the old way is it's kind of a good way to do it. Actually, that could be. But I like to step away and step back from this traditional view to trigger new thoughts, trigger new ideas about how can we make things different in the future. How can we move forward and try out more innovative things? And maybe you end up with building similar things again that are already there in existing desktop IDEs. It could be. It's a good solution. It's a good solution, right?
And you might as well find out why it doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's totally fine. And I'm not totally sure how the future cloud-based development tool will exactly look like. Right? That we have a lot of ideas and a lot of built prototypes and things like that. But I don't have a perfect vision of how exactly every pixel should look like or what every element should look like. I think that will evolve over time.
Do you have kind of an idea of the basic blueprints for the architecture of Flux, like what we can expect to see?
Yeah. There's a pretty clear vision about the architecture of Flux, and that's totally different from what we have in existing desktop IDEs at the moment. The basic idea behind Flux is, for the technical architecture, is first of all, you have very loosely coupled components that are running in a cloud-based environment. And those very small, loose components, they are kind of microservices, where every service can do stuff on its own. And all those components are connected with the asynchronous messaging. So they're just exchanging messages. There's no RESTful API, there's no server that you call to do some stuff. They are just communicating with messages. And that means that on top of these messages, there is some kind of synchronization protocol being implemented so that the desktop IDE can connect to this messaging system. The kind of a cloud-based components connect to this messaging system, and they exchange messages about, oh, you changed the file, or you saved the file, or you're typing, and things like that. And so that the Flux is implementing this kind of synchronization mechanism based on this asynchronous messaging. So it's a little bit like Dropbox for code.
Yeah.
So your files in your desktop IDE, you can connect your project to Flux, and then from there on, your files stay on your local hard drive. There are no changes, but at the same time, running over these asynchronous messages, there's a synchronization happening with the cloud.
But it feels quite seamless.
It's very seamless because you do not even notice that, right? So the files are backed up to the cloud, to some services in the cloud, and whenever you save a file, you change it, it's automatically backed up in the cloud. And even while you're typing, like it's really like Google Docs, right? While you're typing, those changes are also being mirrored and synced with the cloud. And that's a very fundamental kind of the backbone architecture of that. And on top of that, those components that are running inside the cloud, they can participate in the syncing mechanism as well. And that's very interesting because that opens up a huge bunch of possibilities for building these microservices inside the cloud. And for example, there is one service that's kind of a backup repository, so it just backs up the files inside the cloud so that you do not have your desktop IDE open, or you go to you visit your friend, you open a web browser, you can access your web project because you can access your files from the cloud. Even if you stopped typing in your desktop IDE without saying anything, you can open up the browser window on a totally different machine, and it will open the file in exactly the same state because it's all synced.
Like I said, massive timestamp.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And services can do additional stuff, right? So, for example, there's a browser-based editor for your code. Right? You can look at your code, you can edit your code. But editing code, that's not really innovative. If you edit your code, you would like to get feedback, right? You would like to get errors and warnings, and you would per se something should happen. And all that is not implemented inside the browser window. It's implemented with these microservices running in the cloud. So that's, for example, if you're editing a Java file, there is a microservice running in the cloud that is responsible for doing reconciling or compilation errors and warnings for Java. It's just for Java files. So it keeps track of your files and your changes while you're typing. Whenever there's a change coming in, it consumes those changes locally. So it's kind of a micro cloud environment, produces errors and warnings, sends those errors and warnings back to the cloud via these asynchronous messages, and the editor can show that. Right? So that the editor doesn't know anything about there is a microservice for Java running in the cloud, and the editor is not calling the service to get information out of that. It's just because the asynchronous messages and these syncing changes mechanism built on top of it is working among those services. They can exchange these informations and keep track of changes, produce some warnings and similar things. And the result of that is, I think, very interesting because to me it opens up a whole new world of possibilities and a completely new kind of architectural style for building IDEs.
Yeah.
Because the real features and functionality, you extract that into very small components that are these microservices that are running inside the cloud. And other participants in the system, they do not need to know everything about the services or what services are exactly there.
Yeah.
In this case of the editor doesn't know anything about, let's say, Java, or maybe it knows about syntax highlighting for Java, but nothing about the language Java, or the language Groovy, or the language Scala, or whatever language. But there could be one service doing these kind of errors and warnings for Java. So whenever you're typing in a Java file, that service say, you're typing in a Java file, I can do something for you. I send you back errors and warnings for this Java file. And you're typing inside a JavaScript file, I do nothing. I have no idea what file are you typing. But there could be another service saying, I know something about JavaScript, I can do something for you for this JavaScript file. Or totally different service for a Groovy file, or maybe even multiple services for multiple versions of Java. If there's one service saying, I know something about Java 9, because the language changed in Java 9 maybe, I can do something for Java 9, and you can build a service for Java 9.
I guess Java 8 is kind of a big one, difference between that.
Yeah, exactly. And another service can do something for a different Java language. Because they're so separate from each other. It's to me, it feels like a really huge step forward.
Yeah, it's a huge foundation for kind of
It's a huge foundation, and when you're building those services, you can also every service can decide on its own how it would like to be built. Like the Java compilation service, say, I do not want to re-implement everything. I reuse the Eclipse compiler, for example, to implement this service, and that's implemented in Java itself. Things like that. The JavaScript errors and warning service could be implemented in JavaScript and run as a separate component in JavaScript on a node server or somewhere in the cloud. It doesn't even have to be in the same data center or whatever. It's just connected with messages. It can be implemented in JavaScript, and you can do whatever is necessary to build it or reuse existing libraries that are there for JavaScript, like JSLint or ESLint or whatever. You do not have to re-implement everything, or you do not have to re-implement the Java compiler in JavaScript because it has to run in the browser window, something like that, which I think doesn't make sense at all.
No.
You can build these microservices, and that's I think a very every time I think about this architecture, every time I prototype more stuff, and there are a huge bunch of additional ideas coming up. Whenever I talk to people and explain this architecture to people, they say, this is interesting, you could do X, Y, Z with that. And then things I never thought about before.
Something else to do.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. It really triggers like new ideas and innovative ideas for people. And these examples that I described about doing language tooling, you can extend that to all kinds of different languages. Like you say, content assist, for example, where you're typing in Google like a content assist, right? It's implemented the same way. There's a service that's able to provide content assist information to Java, and a different one, content assist for Groovy, and another one, content assist for JavaScript. And they can all run separately inside the cloud environment. The editor doesn't need to know anything about that. You can just send out a message saying, I need content assist. And the service say, yeah, I can give you content assist. And same for navigation, for refactorings. And you can even think about more stuff like running unit tests. Right? There's a service that can run unit tests for you in the cloud all the time if you want, or triggering continuous integration builds or whatever.